Picture this. I'm standing at my kitchen window, the morning light slicing through the blinds in thin golden slivers, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. There's a stillness here, a kind of quiet that feels heavier than it should. My name's Megan, I'm 32, and this suburban 2-story house, our house, has become more of a shell than a home lately. I've been married to Ethan for 6 years now. He's 35, the kind of man who can light up a room with a single grin, but also the kind who's gone more often than not. His job, some nebulous consulting gig, keeps him on the road, leaving me with little more than cryptic texts and half-hearted promises of when he'll be back. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, which sounds freeing until you realize it means hours upon hours in a silent office upstairs. Just me and the hum of my laptop, trying to drown out the emptiness with deadlines and color palettes. Every day starts the same. I wake up to a cold, empty bed, the indent of Ethan's head long gone from his pillow. I shuffle downstairs, brew a pot of coffee, and stand by this very window, mug in hand, staring at the neighbor's perfectly trimmed hedges while I wait for my phone to buzz. This morning, like clockwork, there it was, Ethan's latest message. Delayed again. Might be another day or two. Sorry, babe. I read it twice, letting the words sink in, feeling that familiar pinch in my chest. It's not anger, not exactly. It's more like a slow, creeping ache, one I don't quite let myself name. Loneliness, maybe? I shake it off, sip my coffee, and dive into my latest project. A logo redesigned for some startup I've never heard of. Anything to fill the silence that seems to grow louder with each passing hour. But today, there was something else waiting for me on the kitchen counter. A note, scribbled in Ethan's rushed, jagged handwriting, left right next to the fruit bowl. I picked it up, squinting at the words. Some guys are coming to check the roof today. Don't worry, I've got it under control. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Typical Ethan, always vague, always last minute. Why didn't he mention this sooner? Was I supposed to just guess that strangers would be showing up at our doorstep? I muttered to myself about his lack of communication, but honestly, I'm used to it by now. I folded the note, tucked it into the pocket of my jeans, and tried to push the irritation aside. It's just a roof inspection, right? Nothing to get worked up over. Still, there's a tiny part of me that bristles at how he assumes I'll just handle whatever he throws my way, like I'm some kind of standby manager for our life. The morning dragged on. I lost myself in my work for a while, tweaking fonts and adjusting gradients, when a sharp knock at the front door snapped me out of my focus. My heart gave a little jump, not out of fear exactly, but more like the sudden jolt of being pulled back into the real world. I glanced at the clock on my laptop. It was just past 11. Wiping my hands on my jeans, I made my way downstairs, the wooden steps creaking under my bare feet. I could see 2 figures through the frosted glass of the door, their shapes blurred but imposing. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob and swung it open. There they were, 2 men standing on my porch, both in worn work boots, caked with dried mud and faded jackets, sporting a roofing company logo I didn't recognize. The first guy stepped forward, his broad shoulders filling the doorway as he flashed a cocky grin. "Hey there, I'm Jake," he said, his voice loud and booming, like he was used to being heard over machinery or shouting across job sites. He looked to be in his late 30s, with a scruffy jawline and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Behind him stood the second guy, leaner and younger, maybe late 20s. He gave me a quiet smirk, his eyes lingering on me just a beat too long before he nodded. "Travis?" he said simply, his voice softer, but carrying an edge I couldn't quite place. I felt a flicker of unease ripple through me, standing there alone with these strangers, but I brushed it off as nerves. "It's just a roof inspection," I reminded myself. "Ethan called us about a leak," Jake went on, gesturing vaguely toward the sky as if the problem was written in the clouds. Mind if we take a look? I nodded, stepping aside to let them in, pointing toward the ceiling with a half-hearted wave. Yeah, sure, it's somewhere up there, I guess. As they crossed the threshold, their heavy boots tracked dirt across my freshly mopped floors, little clumps of earth smearing into the hardwood. I bit my lip, swallowing the urge to say something. It's fine, I told myself. They'll be gone soon. They stomped through the living room, their voices already bouncing off the walls as they discussed ladders and access points in a jargon I didn't bother to follow. I was about to head back upstairs when another knock came, lighter this time, almost hesitant. Frowning, I opened the door again to find a third man standing there. He hadn't been mentioned, and he didn't offer a name. He was tall, mid-30s maybe, with cold, piercing eyes that seemed to cut right through me. His presence was different, heavier somehow, like he carried a weight the others didn't. Jake called out from behind me. "Oh, hey Cole, you made it!" Cole just nodded, barely acknowledging me as he stepped inside, his gaze sweeping the room like he was cataloging every detail. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, a chill running through me that I couldn't quite explain. I shook it off, telling myself I was overreacting, and retreated back to my office upstairs. The hum of my laptop welcomed me, a familiar anchor in the sudden storm of unease that had settled in my chest. I tried to focus on my work, dragging my cursor across the screen, but my mind kept drifting to the three men downstairs. Their voices echoed up through the floorboards, a low rumble of laughter and conversation that felt intrusive, like they were claiming a space that wasn't theirs. I couldn't shake the way Cole's eyes had lingered, or the way Travis's smirk seemed to hide something I didn't want to understand. And Jake? His confidence felt like a challenge, like he was daring me to react. I was just starting to lose myself in a design mock-up when a loud shout broke through my thoughts. It was Jake, his voice carrying up from the living room with that same commanding tone. "Hey, Megan, can you come down here for a sec? We can't find any obvious damage. Where's this leak supposed to be?" My stomach twisted at the sound of my name in his mouth, but I pushed the feeling down. They're just doing their job, I told myself. I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid by ignoring them, even if every instinct screamed to stay put. With a sigh, I closed my laptop and headed downstairs, my bare feet cold against the hardwood as I descended. When I reached the living room, all three of them were standing there, looking at me expectantly. Jake had his arms crossed, a playful glint in his eye, while Travis leaned against the wall, his gaze flicking over me like he was sizing me up. Cole, as always, hung back, his expression unreadable, but his presence somehow the most suffocating of all. "Ethan mentioned something about water stains in the attic," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I haven't seen them myself, but I can show you where the access is." Jake nodded, gesturing for me to lead the way, and I felt the weight of their attention as I turned toward the hallway. We climbed the stairs to the second floor, their heavy boots thudding behind me, and I stopped at the narrow door that led to the attic. It was an old thing, paint peeling at the edges, and I hadn't opened it in years. I grabbed the handle and tugged, but it didn't budge. Rusted shut from disuse, probably. My cheeks flushed with embarrassment as I yanked harder, aware of how close they were standing. Jake was right behind me, his breath practically on my neck, and Travis was at my side, his shoulder brushing mine. "Damn thing stuck," I muttered, stepping back and wiping my hands on my jeans. Jake chuckled, a low sound that sent a shiver through me for reasons I didn't want to admit. "No worries, we'll figure it out," he said, but he didn't move away. Neither did Travis. Cole, standing a few steps down the hall, just watched, his cold eyes boring into me like he could see straight through to whatever I was trying to hide. After another futile tug at the door, I sighed and suggested an alternative. "There's another way to get to the roof," I said, my voice a little shakier than I'd intended. "Through the kitchen balcony. Ethan uses a ladder out there sometimes." Jake's grin widened, and he clapped a hand on my shoulder, the touch lingering just a moment too long. "Lead the way then," he said, and I felt my pulse quicken as I turned to head back downstairs. Their footsteps followed, a steady drumbeat that matched the racing of my heart. I couldn't tell if I was nervous or something else entirely, something I didn't want to name. We reached the kitchen, and I slid open the glass door to the small balcony, the crisp afternoon air hitting my face like a slap. It was a tiny space, barely big enough for 2 people, with a rickety metal ladder propped against the wall that led up to the roof. I stepped out, pointing to it as I explained how Ethan had used it before to check things out up there. My voice wavered a little as I spoke, the weight of their presence pressing in on me even out here in the open air. I could feel Jake's eyes on me, that cocky grin still plastered on his face, while Travis lingered close, his silence somehow louder than any words. Cole stayed by the door, half in shadow, his gaze as piercing as ever. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly hyper-aware of the chill in the air. Or maybe it was something deeper. Something I couldn't quite name yet. I just wanted them to get on with it. To climb up. Do whatever they needed to do and leave me alone in my quiet house again. They didn't waste much time after that. Jake took the lead, grabbing the ladder and testing its stability with a quick shake before starting his ascent. Travis followed, tossing a casual smirk my way as he hoisted himself up. Cole went last, moving with a deliberate slowness that made my skin crawl, his eyes flicking to mine for just a moment before he disappeared over the edge. I stayed on the balcony, my hands gripping the railing, listening to the creak of their boots on the roof above. Their voices carried down in muffled bursts, mixed with the occasional clatter of tools or a sharp laugh from Jake. I told myself to go back inside, to get back to my work, but my feet wouldn't move. Something held me there, a gnawing unease that twisted tighter with every passing minute. Time seemed to stretch on forever, the afternoon sun dipping lower, casting long shadows across the backyard. I don't know how long I stood there, lost in my own spiraling thoughts, when I heard the ladder groan again. They were coming back down. Jake was first, wiping sweat from his brow as he stepped onto the balcony with a satisfied grunt. "All done up there?" he said, his tone almost too casual, like we were old pals. Travis landed next, giving me a nod and a muttered, "Thanks for the help," his voice low and rough, carrying a weight I didn't understand. Cole was last, as always, his expression unreadable, but his stare felt like it could burn holes through me. He didn't say a word, just fixed me with that icy look before turning away. Jake gave me a wink, a damn wink, like this was all some kind of game, and then they were gathering their tools, their movements so nonchalant it made my stomach churn. How could they act like nothing had happened up there? Like the air between us wasn't thick with something unspoken? I followed them back inside, my legs trembling beneath me, though I tried to hide it. They didn't linger, didn't make small talk. They just headed for the front door, their boots leaving fresh streaks of dirt on the floor I'd have to clean later. I stood frozen in the kitchen as I heard the door shut behind them, the rumble of their truck starting up and fading into the distance. The house was silent again, but it wasn't the kind of silence I was used to. This was heavier, suffocating, like it was pressing down on me from all sides. My mind was a storm, churning with guilt I couldn't quite place, shame that burned hot in my chest, and a lingering adrenaline that made my hands shake as I gripped the edge of the counter. What had I done? What had I let happen? I couldn't answer those questions, not yet. but they clawed at me, relentless. I knew I couldn't just stand there, drowning in my own thoughts. I had to do something, anything, to erase the traces of this day. So I grabbed a bucket and a scrub brush from under the sink and headed back to the balcony. The floor out there was scuffed and dirty from their boots, and I dropped to my knees, scrubbing at the marks with a ferocity I didn't know I had in me. The cold metal bit into my skin, but I didn't care. I needed it gone, all of it. The dirt, the memory, the weight of their presence. But no matter how hard I scrubbed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. My hands froze mid-scrub, the brush slipping from my grip as I heard the faint sound of the front door creaking open. My heart slammed against my ribs, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin. I thought they'd left. I thought I was alone again. But there it was, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the house. I stayed crouched on the balcony, barely daring to breathe, straining to listen over the pounding in my ears. The steps grew closer, crossing the kitchen threshold, and then I heard his voice, calm and familiar, yet somehow chilling in its unexpectedness. "Megan, you out here?" It was Ethan, my husband, home early, unannounced, when I'd least expected him. Relief should have washed over me, but instead, a new wave of dread curled tight in my chest. I stood up slowly, wiping my damp hands on my jeans, trying to steady my shaky breath. I stepped back into the kitchen, the glass door sliding shut behind me with a soft thud, and there he was, standing in the doorway to the living room. He looked the same as always, tall, composed, his dark hair slightly mussed from travel, his leather jacket still on like he'd just walked in. But there was something off in the way he held himself, something I couldn't quite read in the dim light filtering through the blinds. "Hey," I managed, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to sound normal. I didn't expect you back so soon. How was your trip?" The words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to gauge his mood, to fill the suffocating silence that had settled between us. I took a tentative step forward, my bare feet cold against the tile, searching his face for any hint of warmth, any sign of the man I'd married. But he didn't answer right away. He just stood there, his expression unreadable, his eyes locked on mine in a way that made my skin prickle. Then, without a word, he turned and walked into the living room, gesturing for me to follow with a slight tilt of his head. I hesitated, my stomach churning with a mix of guilt and confusion, but I couldn't just stand there. I trailed behind him, each step feeling heavier than the last, like I was walking toward something I couldn't escape. He sat down on the couch, the old springs creaking under his weight, and I hovered near the doorway, unsure if I should sit or stay standing. The air felt thick, charged with something I didn't understand yet, something that made my palms sweat and my throat tighten. Ethan leaned forward, reaching into the duffel bag he'd dropped by his feet, and pulled out a small tablet. He set it on the coffee table between us with a deliberate, almost ceremonial slowness. The screen dark, but somehow menacing in its stillness. "Sit down, Megan," he said finally, his voice low, devoid of any emotion I could grasp. I obeyed, perching on the edge of the armchair across from him, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. He didn't look at me as he tapped the screen, bringing it to life with a faint glow that cast sharp shadows across his face. My heart was a wild drumbeat now, each second stretching into eternity as I waited for whatever was coming. Then he pressed play, and the world as I knew it shattered. The video started, crisp and high definition, showing a view I recognized instantly, the kitchen balcony, filmed from some hidden angle, maybe the neighbor's yard or a drone, I couldn't tell. My breath caught in my throat as I saw myself standing there, earlier today, the afternoon sun glinting off the metal railing. Jake was behind me, too close, his grin sharp and knowing. Travis was at my side, his hand brushing my arm in a way that looked far too intimate on the screen. And Cole stood by the door, his cold gaze fixed on me, silent but complicit. Every detail was captured. Every moment I'd tried to bury in the back of my mind laid bare in vivid color. I watched, horrified, as the scene played out, my own face betraying a mix of nerves and something else. Something I didn't want to admit even to myself. My stomach churned as the footage rolled on, showing every glance, every subtle shift in body language that now seemed so damning under Ethan's silent scrutiny. The video didn't just capture the moment, it twisted it, made it look like I'd invited their closeness, like I'd reveled in it. I wanted to scream, to explain, but my throat was dry, my words trapped somewhere deep inside me. When the screen finally went black, the silence in the room was deafening, heavier than any accusation could have been. I forced myself to look at Ethan, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. He wasn't angry, though. That's what unnerved me the most. There was no shouting, no clenched fists or furrowed brow. Instead, he leaned back on the couch, one arm draped casually over the armrest, his eyes fixed on me with a faint, knowing smile that sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't a smile of warmth or forgiveness. It was something darker, something that made my skin crawl. He reached for the glass of water on the side table, took a slow sip, and then set it back down with a soft clink, as if we were just having a casual chat over dinner. Ethan, I started, my voice barely above a whisper, but he cut me off with a slight raise of his hand, not even looking at me as he did it. "Don't," he said, his tone calm, almost gentle, but laced with an edge that made me freeze. "Not yet. We'll talk when you're ready." His words hung in the air, cryptic and chilling, as he stood up, brushing imaginary lint off his jacket. He walked past me toward the kitchen, his steps unhurried, like nothing in the world was wrong. I heard the clink of a glass again, the sound of liquid pouring, and I realized he was making himself a drink, acting as if this bombshell hadn't just detonated between us. I sat there, rooted to the armchair, my mind a chaotic mess of fear, guilt, and confusion, unable to process how he could be so unaffected. The hours that followed blurred into a haze. I stayed in the living room for a while, staring at the blank tablet screen, replaying every second of that video in my head, trying to understand how it had come to this. How had he gotten that footage? Had he been watching me all along? And why wasn't he raging at me, demanding answers? His calm was more terrifying than any outburst could have been. Eventually, I couldn't stand the weight of my own thoughts anymore. I needed space, a barrier between us, so I retreated upstairs to my office, the one place in this house that still felt like mine. I turned the lock on the door with a shaky hand, the click sounding louder than it should have in the oppressive quiet. Sitting at my desk, I stared at the dark screen of my laptop, unable to focus on anything but the sickening realization that Ethan had set me up. He'd orchestrated this. Those men, the supposed roof inspection, the hidden camera. He'd watched me stumble into whatever trap he'd laid, and worse, he seemed to enjoy it. That faint smile of his haunted me, a silent taunt that I couldn't escape. I tried to piece it together, to make sense of it all. Why would he do this? Was it some kind of test? A twisted game to see how far I'd go? Or was it punishment for something I didn't even know I'd done? I whispered questions to myself in the dim light of my office. Why? How? Who were Jake, Travis, and Cole really? But there were no answers, just the echo of Ethan's cryptic promise to talk when I'm ready. Ready for what? The truth? Or something worse? My mind spun with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. I thought about confronting him, demanding explanations, but the thought of facing that unnerving calm of his made my stomach twist. I wasn't sure I could handle whatever he'd say next. Then there was the other option. The one that involved quietly slipping away and leaving the questions unanswered, a choice that felt both cowardly and oddly liberating. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.